Member from St. Andrews Southern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Couple of points on this bill to amend the Income Tax Act. First of all, I join in the query raised by my colleague, the member for Southeast St. Andrew, as to whether this exemption being granted to employees from paying income tax on up to $200,000, whether any similar exemption will apply to other statutory contributions and obligations that apply to payroll, such as NIS contributions, NHT contributions, HART, which is an employee cost, and so on. This would only apply to income tax. So if it is not done with the others in mind, the employee would still potentially be liable to pay contributions under $200,000 under those other laws that govern those matters. So I think it's an important point for her to clarify for the House. Secondly, I was puzzled when I heard the minister say that there's a mechanism for making this a permanent facility, because the amendment to Section 5 is very specific to payments of not exceeding in the aggregate $200,000 paid by an employer to an employee between November 1, 2025 and March 31, 2026 for personal recovery and welfare due to loss or damage suffered from the effects of Hurricane Melissa. So it specifies the time frame, it specifies the amount, and it specifies the specific disaster. So this is obviously not going to impact future events where the government may wish to provide similar relief. So I would endorse the approach, though not necessarily the specific wording proposed, because it's hard to follow it orally, but the approach being suggested that would provide a mechanism in Section 51C4C to allow the minister in the future, by order, subject to bring it to Parliament for affirmative resolution, to implement whatever may be the appropriate level of relief in those circumstances in the future, without having to come to amend the Income Tax Act again to do so. Thirdly, on the matter of the date for filing of corporate income tax returns, I agree with this amendment to move it to a date in April, the 15th of April. Indeed, I had called for that in my budget presentation, I think 2 or 3 years ago, that be done. So I'm happy to see it being done. I would just like to read an excerpt from the statement on fiscal affairs from the Independent Fiscal Commissioner, which was published in September 2025 in respect of the first quarter of this fiscal year. And he said, and I quote, "Of note, the fiscal balance and primary balance, i.e. 0.2% of GDP and 5.4% of GDP respectively, were broadly in line with their corresponding programmed values under the third supplementary estimates and the initial budget. Notwithstanding, tax revenue of $882.8 billion was lower than originally budgeted by $16.5 billion, or 1.8%, and $14.2 billion, or 1.6% less than estimated under the third supplementary estimates. The bulk of the shortfall occurred in March, the last month of the fiscal year, when income tax returns are due." This is talking about March 2025. It is against this backdrop that the Independent Fiscal Commissioner reiterates its call for the government of Jamaica to shift the due date for tax returns from March to a month in the first quarter of the fiscal year to better manage the risks associated with revenue shortfalls. And that, I think, summarizes another reason why it's important to make this amendment, because by having tax returns filed in the fiscal year itself, in the last year, it's very difficult to budget for the coming year because you don't know what your actual revenue for the current year will end up being. And that has been identified by the Fiscal Commissioner as a fiscal risk, which should be remedied. So I am happy to see what I had proposed a few years ago, what the independent Fiscal Commissioner had proposed, and I think the minister's predecessor had also seen the logic of it being enacted here today. The other two issues I would like to hear from the minister on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With regards to section 67B, the member asked about whether or not those who file, if they have tax that remains unpaid, would they be assessed? And no, it is not about an assessment. It's about the making sure that, hold on the date. The section is really creating a deemed collection date, not a deemed assessment. That is what that is doing there. And with regards to the question, will statutories be exempt? Member, yes, they will be exempt. All the others for that. The law says it's exempt. So when you do your filings, and it is also, well, all the other taxes would be relieved because these pieces of legislation rely on the definition of emolument in the Income Tax Act. Therefore, to the extent that it is not charged to income tax, it will not attract the other statutories, right? And I answered your prior question about the assessment versus the collection date. Okay, I think that's it.
Go ahead, let me hear the point of order.
If you ask your questions on mic, for the benefit of the record. Thank you. Angela, why are you so miserable today? Angela. What am I got problem at home? Don't bring your whole problem. Come on. Come on.
You want to move? Sorry. So, Mr. Speaker, clearly, as the minister is moving to close the debate, some suggestions have been made. So we're going to just suspend the debate on the Income Tax Act so that the minister can have that consultation. But as the team is here and the minister does have additional matters, we're going to move into the next matter, suspend this so that you can consult on the point that has been raised.
And that for the income tax.
For the income tax. So we suspend the debate and the minister will move into the asset tax.
Asset tax.
Amendments to the asset tax.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in my opening remarks, I did speak to the income tax and the asset tax as well, and so I would, seek any
The floor is
questions
open
at
for
the
members to contribute. Minister, are you asking for the second reading of the asset tax?
No.